Hello, this is Ciprian Borodescu, CEO at MorphL, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our third webinar, Advanced Segmentation Strategies to Boost Your Website Revenue. For those of you who don't know, MorphL is a platform that uses AI to predict user behaviors in digital products and services with the end goal of increasing product metrics and business KPIs. I'm here with Magda Baciu, founder at House of Progress. Magda, I'm super excited to have you on our webinar series. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ciprian, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to share with you the analytics strategy my team and I developed in the past years.
Awesome. So I suggest we dive right in. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and then jump straight into the presentation?
Yeah, sure. As Ciprian mentioned, I'm leading House of Progress, a data analytics and growth agency that I founded about 3 years ago. We are focused on leveraging data analytics and research for marketing purposes. More specifically, we are helping online businesses to implement complex tracking plans to accurately collect data. And we're also building customer-centric CRO and advertising strategies. Obviously, we are working with various types of data, but today we are going to focus on the quantitative side of things, where actually the main challenge is data overload. That's why I'm going to bring in a bit of structure so you can easier extract actionable insights and more efficiently invest your resources. But before going into that, I'd like you to be aware that even if I'm going to talk about leveraging data analytics for conversion optimization purposes, this process is actually scalable for various online marketing fields, and it's also helpful to find website data patterns that you can later on exploit or explore through machine learning. And for example, let's take a look at our peers from Spotify that are really having fun with data, and they're using data analytics for all things advertising and beyond that, because as you might know, they really have a very cool and personalized user experience for Spotify product. So that's why the data analytics side of the business is really valuable for them. So that's one way to have fun with data, advertising, but optimizing the conversion rate of your website is definitely interesting and valuable too. And the irony here is that most of the businesses, if not all, are tracking their online data through various tools, but such a small percent of them are actually activating it, and that's such a pity. What I want you to know is that there's no way to go around building a segmentation strategy if you really want to leverage data and to bring more money into the business. And in order to do that, there are 3 main steps we are going to tackle. Let's see the first one. The first one is mainly about understanding the business to give context to the data you are going to segment later on. And it's very important how you do that, because it's going to highly impact the way you are asking questions later on and the way you are looking at data. Of course, you don't have to miss the interim step that's auditing the analytics data and really find out what's correct in there and what's not, because most of the time it's not 100% of the data is correct, so you have to know what you can rely on. Cool, so that's the big picture, but in order to better understand and get more practical, let's see how the first phase will look like when applied on Etsy. So Etsy is the biggest marketplace for unique and creative goods, and as any marketplace out there, it has 2 sides, the seller side and the buyer side. And now, for the sake of simplicity, we are going to focus on the buyer side because it's more like an e-commerce. It's a business model that we are all familiar with, so it's easier to understand the next steps. And We mainly have to start with understanding the North Star, why we are optimizing, towards what objective. And then you have to sit down with marketing and customer teams to understand which are the KPIs and metrics that are highly important and they impact the main objectives. And these are super valuable, don't get me wrong, but what's even more important for this purpose of building a data analytics segmentation strategy is to understand what are the main macro and micro actions visitors are doing on the website, because in order to impact the main objective, you have to understand on a more granular level what people are doing on the website. And why is that? Well, mostly the most interesting behavior patterns are revealed when you're looking at this type of events, because this is the depth level that comes with actionable insights. And when I'm referring to macro actions, I'm simply referring to actions like applying a filter, using a certain feature you have on the website, contacting the owner, requesting a custom order, and so on. It depends on the type of business you're looking at. But this is something that's really important when you're going to ask questions and look at data. Going one step ahead, we also have to understand the different customer journeys you have on the website. So it might be that new customers with no account only have one option to buy product, that's the add to cart option, while the returning visitors with an account might have two different possibilities to buy product. And you have to really tell apart these different customer journeys, because it matters when you look at data how you're going to segment that. And last but not least, we have to conduct audience research. And no worry, there are more tactics that are available out there, but depending on your needs and the size of the business, I really recommend you to start with the first 5, because they're not really time consuming and don't require a lot of resources. So I simply start with the heuristics analysis, then heat maps, hire a few user testers to see live what's their opinion and what frustrates them and what they're happy about, and then you really leverage the chat transcripts you have, because that's gold. It's simply an easy way to really understand what the people like and what they dislike about the website. And last but not least, on-site surveys are really simply to implement, and I recommend you to go ahead with that. Then if you have additional resources, I really recommend to build customer profiles and to have a few chats with existing customers or potential customers. But not all the steps are mandatory in the first phase, because you have to simply do your best with the resources you have. So depending on your needs, please choose a few of these tactics. Then it's about data health check. It's very important to understand what data you can rely on. And obviously this is a very important step, as I earlier mentioned, because most of the businesses have really significant data collection issues. For example, we analyzed the past 20 businesses we've been working with. And for 6 of them, we had to declare data bankruptcy at the beginning, because they were having such a small percent of data that was correct, so there's nothing you can work with. But it's better to know beforehand if that's the situation, if you have very inaccurate data, because otherwise you're going to invest loads of time in data analysis and you simply take distorted decisions without even knowing which is the reality. So please don't skip this step, because it's very important to consider it. So we made it. We went through the first two steps necessary in order to inform the segmentation strategy. So let's see how that looks like. We have here a simple representation of how we go about building it, and it mainly boils down to segmentation variables and segmentation depth. And we simply start with the primary question that's based on one and only variable. It can be age, gender, location, or any macro or micro action the visitor took on the website. And then we go into more layered questions. So we add more variables into the mix, and we ask more complex questions. But let's see how that looks like applied on Etsy. So what we see here, it's another framework that's basically a different representation of the one I mentioned earlier. And we start with the primary question that revolves around one variable that for this context is the user's device. And what I wanted to be aware is that the aim of this primary question is not to give you actionable insights, but rather to get you started with more complex questions. So, for example, going ahead and adding a second variable to the mix and asking if there's any difference interacting with the website search bar when comparing mobile versus desktop visitors. And at this point, we start to see some interesting patterns. So for example, in here, it's obvious that those that interact with the site search have a higher conversion rate, and especially on the desktop. So what we have to do with this one is to find more creative ways either to emphasize this website feature or to simply find more ways to incorporate this feature in different website sections. Going ahead, we add a third variable to the mix, and we want to find out if there are any patterns when looking at how male versus female uses certain website feature like request custom orders, and we also want to compare the mobile versus desktop segments. So we'll get this data, and we can obviously see that especially male coming from mobile are almost not using at all this website feature. But the behavior for mail is also kept for desktop. So we have to think about personalizing the experience for male versus male, for male versus female, because it's obvious we simply put a feature that's using the male cognitive resources, but they are not interested in. So it's better to show something that's of interest to the segment. So for this specific case, we have to build a hypothesis and to think about personalizing the experience for different genders. And then we simply go ahead with adding more and more segmentation variables into the mix. But for smaller websites, it mainly boils down to secondary and tertiary questions, because you have to have loads of traffic to go ahead and play with questions that incorporate 4 or more variables. And if you didn't notice, we are looking at a very beautiful pine tree, and each primary question is the root of a new pine tree. So you have to really think of different primary questions that make sense for the website and build different pine trees, or however you want to call them. And if you have millions of website traffic, then you are gonna get to a very complex forest. But this is again only applicable to websites that have a very high monthly traffic. Hopefully the webinar left you with a few ideas on the segmentation approach. And if you want to see more of the examples of the segmentation questions I asked, please access this link because you'll find loads of questions applied on Etsy that you can simply copy and paste and adapt for your own business. And before ending this, I simply want to remind you once again that it's very important to not skip the qualitative research part and the data health check part before building segmentation strategy. It's very important to do that so you don't waste time on data analyzing something you don't understand the contents behind or simply is not correct. So please do that before digging into the segmentation part. And that was all. Hopefully it was valuable for you. And please ping me on LinkedIn or send me an email if you have any kind of questions related to segmentation strategies, CRO, or data analytics.
So I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. What are the types of industries or the type of companies like industry or size that usually employ these kind of strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I was trying to segment this type of businesses that want to use data since the very beginning when I founded House of Progress. And looking back in the past 3 years, I would say that the types of businesses that really leverage data analytics are those businesses that have significant traffic to the website, so they want to optimize that. If that's in terms of the size of traffic, but also if when you're looking at the industries, it's mainly e-commerce,
Yep.
Education businesses that want to sell different types of courses. And also I noticed that software as a service businesses want to leverage more and more data because they need that when they want to raise the next the next stage of investment, because they really have to explain to potential investors what the data says in there. So this is some patterns that I noticed in the market.
There's another industry or vertical that we saw interesting as well, which is media publishing, especially those that have some sort of subscription on their website.
Yeah,
well.
that's true. That's true also because they get loads of traffic, and it's very important for them to optimize starting with the engagement metrics and go further in the funnel.
Yeah, I actually saw a couple of months ago that these guys from medium.com already started looking to hire machine learning engineers and data scientists because they also concentrate on converting as many readers as possible to their paid plans.
Yeah, I think that's the right time for them. And speaking about that, it's really important how you start building the business because I know that Airbnb hired the data analyst since in the first 3 months, I think. So data analytics was part of the core of the business. So yeah.
Interesting. So speaking about the key roles in a modern marketing department today, especially related to the analytics optimization side of things, what are these key roles? What have you seen working for different companies?
Yeah, so I think there are a few patterns I noticed, and I noticed that companies that have loads of resources jump straight forward and hire a data science team. But I'm not sure if that's the right way to go about it. I firstly simply make sure that I have the data collection and data analyst and data engineer in place, incorporated within the marketing team. And only after that, I'll consider a data scientist, because data science seems like and sounds very fancy and nice, and it is, but you have to do it properly. It's first data analytics and then it's data science. And of course, you need someone to leverage and to put together all these kind of insights, algorithms, and understand how to put them in practice and bring in revenue. And that will be like a conversion rate optimization specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mainly data analytics on the tracking and data analysis part, the CRO person, and then the data scientist, if the company has enough resources to invest.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I saw a couple of months ago a report. I think you also noticed that they were saying something like out of, I don't know, 10 startups that working in AI, only 2 or 3 are actually employing AI strategies, and the rest of them are fake or something like that. Well, I read the report from start, from cover to end, and there's no such thing of in that report about that. So I think it was kind of like a fake news, or at least a clickbait title. But that report was really interesting, and it was addressing exactly what you said. In terms of roles and in terms of caring for the data, having the right data collection strategies in place. And most of the companies, like 40-50%, actually either have the resources in-house, and others, the rest of them actually prefer to outsource or to hire different companies that are with AI and machine learning and stuff like that, because it's really hard nowadays to have talented machine learning data scientists to hire them into your own company. That's I think that's a struggle for the next few years as well.
Yeah, it's gonna stay there for the next decade, I think, because it doesn't make sense for a small company, let's say for a company whose core is not data science, to hire data scientists. Data scientists want to be surrounded by more experienced data scientists and so on. So they need to be within like a group of 10 people that work towards the same goal and do the same thing. Because they want to learn from each other. They are going to leave the company if they don't have colleagues to learn from, and that's the challenge on one side. On the other side, it's financial wise to simply hire someone 20 hours per month if you only need that, instead of hiring a full-time person, because that's pretty expensive.
True that. So one of the questions, and I like, this is promise that the last question I'm gonna ask. So we get asked a lot at MorphL is like, okay, so you've now provided us with these predictions, and what do we do with them? How do we apply these predictions to our business? And I think that the framework you've presented is a perfect way of identifying potential use cases, where to experiment with different campaigns, basically where to focus your efforts and your attention and get the best results. So have you seen, based on your experience and working with different companies, is machine learning something you've seen using or being used in identifying segments that were otherwise hard to identify by human specialists?
Well, of course, they are those very granular patterns. You can't spot them just looking at data. We're working with data in Excel for other programs, but they are very, very granular, and it's more about the clusters, very specific clusters you want to identify. But the way I go about it is simply understand and segment the data to spot initial patterns, and generally, like, you can spot some the main segments and patterns that are more general, and then you have to leverage machine learning to go a bit more in depth. For example, it's very it's easy to understand a pattern behavior for new visitors that are coming from US, from the States, let's say.
Yeah.
But when you want to go even deeper than that, then it's like it starts to become more and more difficult to really identify patterns. So it takes more time. So better leverage machine learning at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right, this was Advanced Segmentation Strategies to Boost Your Website Revenue in a nutshell. Magda, it was a pleasure. Thank you for your insightful presentation.
Thanks guys for watching us. Hope this was a valuable presentation for you and you've learned something new today.
Awesome. This is where you can find me and Magda. Thank you all for watching and be sure to follow this webinar series. We're going to post a new webinar every month. The next one is scheduled for August 21st. So stay tuned for the next videos and make sure to subscribe or leave a comment below if you have any questions. See you next time.